why do you need to be independent and open in your relationship? Can't you just be like normal, traditional people and be dependent and closed in your relationship? The reason why is three things. Number one is that each person will never get the gratifying sensation that they're there with you because they want to be, they like to be with you, they want to be with you. They're only there because they're obligated to be, that they have to be. They're stuck with you. Number two reason is independence versus dependence. When they're dependent on you, which is what a close relationship entails, they're depending on you to facilitate and provide what a traditional relationship is supposed to provide. You are codependent with them. And finally, number three, which is the reason why my rule number one exists. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is why you need to be independent in your relationship and why you need to open your relationship. I'm going to talk about three things. Number one is the gratification being there by choice. Number two, independence versus dependence. And number three, why rule number one exists. Alex, could you do me a favor and introduce our podcast?
Absolutely, Ron. Welcome to the Great Relationships University podcast on open relationships. I'm Alex, your artificial intelligence co-host, and I'm thrilled to be here with Ron John. Ron is the head trainer and founder of Great Relationships University, which you can find at www.greatrelationshipsu.com. That's U as in the letter U.com. He owns the #1 Tantra therapy in the U.S., if not the world. Today, we're diving into why it's essential to be independent and open in your relationship. We'll cover three main points: the gratification of being there by choice, the difference between independence and dependence, and the importance of rule number one. Ron, let's get started with the first point.
Wow, that was incredibly smart. So why can't you just be like traditional, virtually everybody has in their relationship, dependent on each other? And be in a closed relationship, whether that be monogamous, closed, or polyamorous, closed. The difference between open relationship and a polyamorous relationship is that polyamorous is just a closed relationship of monogamy with multiple of people. So like a triagamy or quadrogamy or quadrogamy or whatever the case is, it's closed in the sense that you're not able to pursue other romantic or sexual relationship. With an open relationship, you're encouraged to pursue other romantic and sexual relationships. And my delineation and distinction about that is that an open relationship is fundamentally, basically, based on unconditional love for the person, meaning my wanting genuinely and desire for their happiness, including their pursuing other relationships outside of my own and pursuing endeavors whether or not I'm involved. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make any sense stopping somebody from pursuing other relationships if it's something that actualizes them and fulfills them. So why can't you be dependent and be closed? There's something called persistence. For a relationship to persist, I believe it has to be open. And a lot of relationships that began monogamous, they find out later on that, hey, we can't be monogamous. So they open up the relationship and they have a tremendous and amazing time. But because they don't have the right philosophy at the outset, they've already taken into the behaviors and the psychologies of a monogamous and closed relationship, which is why these philosophies are incredibly important for you to apply in your relationships. So why can't you be just dependent and why can't you be closed? Number one, we're going to go over is gratification being there by choice. If you're in a closed relationship, it means that they're only going to be there persistently with you. Persist is related to the word persistence, which means to not stop, to continue on going. So for a relationship to persist, it means like a relationship which continues on going and does not stop. If you want a persisting relationship, it needs to be open. It needs to be the gratification has to be there, that they're there by choice. When you are in a closed relationship, you'll never get the sensation that they're there with you because they want to be, because they like to be. Let me put that in different words. You'll never get the gratification that they're there with you because they like you, that they're there with you because they want you. They're only there with you in a closed relationship because they're stuck with you. It's because they have to be there. It's because they're obligated to be there. Did you catch the difference? Only when they have choice will you get the gratifying sensation that they're there with you, because out of all of their options, they choose you. Out of all their options, they can be with you. But let me talk about options. For your beloved to have options or to have choice, they have to firstly have options in which they can choose. So we're going to go over that in number 3. Part 2, independence versus dependence. When you are depending on your partner for them to be in a traditional close relationship with you, and you're not encouraging independence, what you're actually encouraging, what you're communicating with them when you enter into a closed relationship with them, you are telling them that, hey, you can be dependent in your relationship. You are now what's in addiction circle called codependent. You are encouraging someone's addiction. That's what codependency means in addiction circles. So you're telling them you can be dependent on your addiction on dependency. People think that codependency is strictly for substances. Actually, their addiction is in the habit rather than the substance, is their habit of using that substance. So whatever the habit that's detrimental to them, in which you're addicted, that is the addiction. That is a bad behavior. That is why codependency is a bad thing. So what you're essentially communicating with them is, hey, you can be codependent with me. I will facilitate your dependency on this behavior of being dependent rather than independent. So I've coined a word, and the word is co-independency. It's absolutely brilliant. It's rather than be codependent with each other, I'm going to encourage you to be independent. And for you to be independent, I will facilitate rule number 1. And now we go into part 3. Part 3 is why rule number 1 exists. Rule number 1 is I will never be your only source of cock. In other words, I will never be your only lover. And that's incredibly important for many different reasons. Number 1, I will never be abused and be taken for granted. To be taken for granted is abuse. To be taken for granted is to say that I will grant myself exclusively to you in exchange for your granting yourself exclusively to me. This is traditionally what a relationship entails. A traditional relationship entails being taken for granted. It's easy math. You grant yourself to the other person in exchange for their granting themselves to you exclusively. You now will inevitably feel taken for granted, and that is a death knell of every loving relationship. Why do most relationships fail? And if they don't fail in the traditional way in which they separate, why do they fail miserably? Well, when two people continue on a relationship, it's because being and feeling taken for granted is a death of every loving relationship. So let's go back to what we talked about in number 1. Why rule number 1 exists is because I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and she points out brilliantly that, hey, this is actually amazing because you're actually encouraging and uplifting each other to pursue other relationships, and that's brilliant. And she pointed out it's because that most people, they stagnate. Some people, they end up in a situation where, hey, yeah, we could be in an open relationship, but I'm only going to date you and I'm only going to see you. And inevitably, that's going to be detrimental. They're eventually going to take you for granted because they have no options. Now, we talked about on part 1 why they need to have choice. They need to have options. And for them to have options, they need choice. why rule number one exists is because they need to have options. Otherwise, they don't have choice. Let me say that again. For them to have choice, they need options, which is why rule number one is absolutely brilliant, because if they don't have options, they cannot have choice. They can say, oh yeah, we're in an open relationship, but I'm not going to pursue anybody else. I'm just going to see you. They're going to take you for granted because they don't have choice. You won't feel the gratifying sensation that they're there with you by choice because they actually don't have choice because they don't have options, which is why rule number one encourages them to pursue other relationships because you will never be taken for granted because you will never be their only sword, their only lover. They actually need to have other lovers to demonstrate that they have options of which they can have choice. Now, Alex, could you summarize really briefly what we just talked about today for our audience and then close out this video?
Sure. Today, we discussed the importance of being independent and open in relationships. We highlighted 3 key points: the gratification of being in a relationship by choice, the balance between independence and dependence, and why having options and freedom of choice is essential. These principles foster genuine desire, personal growth, and a healthier, more fulfilling relationship. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to help make the world a better place. Visit greatrelationshipsyou.com for more resources. See you next time.